Joining me now is James Zogby. He's in Washington, D.C. He's also the founder of the Arab American Institute. Mr. Zogby, thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. The deadliest day in the West Bank in almost 20 years. What do you make of that?
Look, this has been a period of great trauma for Palestinians and now for Israelis. I mean, there's simply no justification for the massacre of these 7 people. Just as I believe there was no justification for what Israel has been doing in Jenin. Understand that the raid that took place yesterday killed 10, but there has been ongoing invasions of Jenin. And the Israelis always claim that it's a ticking bomb or that they were going after assailants. But, you know, when the judge and jury is the bullet from an Israeli gun, we have no way to understand who they were doing or what they were doing. But what they were doing, we know, is invading a Palestinian community, going undercover. They were using milk trucks this time, creating terror and fear. And yeah, people shoot at them, as people will do when they feel that they're under invasion. And so it's traumatic. And I think that Palestinians have been living with this for a long time. And Jenin in particular is a hotbed because of the way that Israel has acted with impunity in that area.
Your institute is based in the U.S. Antony Blinken is heading to the Middle East next week. He said that this isn't going to affect his trip. What would you like to see come out of that? Obviously, he wasn't intending to have this on his radar, I suppose, but it's now obviously got to be center stage, surely.
It's on his radar, no doubt. And frankly, I just met with him today. A group of us did. And what we did was we urged him to indicate, to make clear that there were consequences to behavior. There's always consequences for Palestinian behavior. Either the U.S. takes sanctions against them, they cut support, close the office, etc., or the Israelis demonstrate consequences by military force. Given the asymmetry of power, they are able to take many more Palestinian lives than Palestinians can take of their lives. But there are no consequences for Israel from the United States at all. We will say to them, oh, we don't want you to do this, or oh, this settlement's not a good idea, or please don't continue the violence, or free these prisoners, whatever. And Israel just pockets it. I've been doing this work for 50 years now. And quiet démarche or actually speaking directly to the Israelis by saying, don't do this, they don't pay a price. And if they don't pay a price, they operate with impunity. And so we urge the secretary to make it clear to the Israelis that there would be consequences, and to lay out what some consequences might be that would impede this behavior, and would also give to the Palestinians a sense that they have hope, that the United States can lead and can play a positive role in respecting their concerns as much as they respect Israel's concerns. He's going to go. We just want his trip to be meaningful, and to be meaningful, I think it's got to make clear that there will be consequences to bad behavior. This government in Israel is not just bad people; it's bad people doing really bad things. And to have Smotrich and Ben Gvir literally in charge of the West Bank and Palestinian daily life is a frightening circumstance. In America, it would be giving David Duke control over police forces around the country. It's a horrific circumstance.
I want to touch on that a little later on, but let's go back to those consequences. What do you want those to look like? What framework did you give him that you would like to see done?
Look, there are things that you can do that are short of cutting aid. I mean, I'd like to cut aid, but I know that that's a congressional issue. But the U.S. can support UN resolutions. We can take the sanctions that we put on the International Criminal Court, take them away. We can take the 6 human rights groups that Israel has declared terrorists with no evidence, that have been rejected by the Europeans and rejected by the U.S., and we can say, we don't accept that, and we're going to support these groups financially so that they can continue to be human rights defenders in the West Bank. That would send a huge message to the Israelis. Even really tough talk. I mean, Clinton, I remember, was very clever in being able to come up with things that the Israelis read back quite clearly as not whining, not complaining, but making a very definitive position. You may not cross this line. They got the message. But operating as we have for the last 2 decades, with only sweet talk and no direct consequences, what's happened is that the Israelis have come to operate with impunity. The peace forces in Israel have died because they get no backup support from the United States. And there's Palestinians have lost hope. And in this deformed political situation that has evolved, Hamas is stronger, the Palestinian Authority is weaker, the right in Israel has gained not only control of government, but of the majority of the seats in the Knesset. Even those who aren't in the government have that position. And the peace forces in Israel has died. U.S. has to take it on itself to reshape this dynamic and to give it hope and life by taking a very firm position on what is acceptable and what is unacceptable, and that there's a price to be paid for unacceptable behavior.
I want to pull on that thread. Many have said this is the most far-right government Israel has seen since its existence. Ben-Gvir, who's now national security minister, there are videos of him brandishing weapons towards Palestinians during protests, telling security forces to not hold back. What does the future look like if people like that are the people that the US has to negotiate with?
You're seeing the future right now. It's unfolding before us. Unlimited Israeli acts of provocation in the West Bank. Incidentally, today, after the massacre that took place at the synagogue in the settlement in the east of Jerusalem, settlers killed a Palestinian in retaliation, apparently. These kinds of things will continue because the guy who lead the cheering squad, the coat holder for violent settlers and violent border patrol people, is now the minister in charge of them. There'll be no restraint, and there's a real danger here. We're sitting on a powder keg. It's the fuse is burning. The question is the U.S. going to act decisively? Because it's the only force that can act decisively to cut this fuse off and stop it. And the only way you can do that is with declaring some specific consequences to bad behavior. It's in the U.S.'s hands and it's in Israel's hands to stop this. And I'm sorry to say I don't have real confidence that it'll happen, but I know what has to happen if we're gonna stop this thing from spinning out of control, as it very well might in the next few days.
Mr. James Zogby, thank you so much for joining me there live from Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, my heart goes out to the people who lost their lives today and also to those who lost their lives yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you for that.